and make sure the grass guy closed the gate so our dog Dallas doesn't get out. But me, I really hardly have a reason, so I just don't go back there. So maybe about a day or two later, I thought about the comment he made, and he was like, man, that backyard looks real bad. And so I go back there, and I'm walking around the backyard, and I'm looking. And when I tell you, I look at the ground and the soil, and it's so dry. There are cracks that are so deep, like deep, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I'm looking around, and then I go to the side of the house. There's a back corner of the house, and I'm looking. There is a crack that's so deep you can see underneath the foundation. So now I'm kind of upset. So I go back in the house, and I'm like, Femi, that's not bad. It's horrible. Like this is like, how did this happen? How did this get this way? Now I'm mad. And so I'm mad at me. I'm mad at Femi. I'm mad at the kid. Pretty much everybody who live in the house, the dog, because this shouldn't have not gotten this bad. And it wasn't that I was upset that how bad it looked. It was more because I had a plan in place. And I realized that dry soil, though, that cracked ground, it had the potential to affect the plan that I had in place. You see, last year around May, I came to Femi and I said, okay, I have this plan. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to work this plan, okay? So we're going to get a lump sum of money, and we're going to just start putting it on my car every month. And if I did the math right, we'll pay off my car by December of 22. So we do that. And I said, now, that lump sum of money that we were putting on my car, we're going to move it over and add it to your car in addition to the payment we were already making. And then if I do the math right, about September of 2023, we'll pay your car off. Check, we did that. So then I was like, okay, now that lump sum we was putting on your car plus the payment we were putting on your car, we're going to start putting it to the principal on the house. That was the plan. And here we are, September. We paid off his car. But then I looked, and our backyard is falling apart. And I realized that if the soil gets so dry and cracked, now it has potential to affect the foundation of the house. So this is why I'm mad. So, of course, now I go and I start researching. I'm like, okay, let me see if it's caused damage to the house yet, and what do we need to do to fix it and prevent it from happening again. So I'm doing all this research, and I'm looking, and I'm studying, and then I realize that there's more than just water and grass. Like, there's levels to this thing. There's different terms, and there's different type of soils. And then so I'm reading. I'm like, okay, there's a clay, there's sandy, there's like all these different type of soils, and when I looked it up, there's 4 different type of soils. And I think it's so funny because God, he always brings that thing around full circle. And I'm reminded that Jesus also said, there's 4 different type of soils that affects your foundation. He says, go over with me to Mark chapter 4, verses 2 through 8. Mark chapter 4, verses 2 through 8. And it reads, he taught them many things by parables, and in his teaching said, listen, a farmer went out to sow seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. He said some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell on thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so they did not bear grain. Still, other seed fell on good soil, and it came up, grew, and produced a crop, sometimes multiplying 30, some 60, and some 100 times. So if you give me a few minutes, I'd like to just teach a simple topic called your response. See, in this text, Jesus, he's at the Sea of Galilee, and he's speaking to a crowd of people, and he's giving them a parable about soil and about a farmer who is sowing seed. And so he has to speak in parable, and he gives them example, because you have to realize in this time, this is what people did. They planted, they grew things, they had crops and livestock, and this was that time. So he is preaching in a form that they may understand. So Jesus, he's telling them the story, and he gives them this parable. And so later on, he's alone with the disciples, and the disciples are like, well, what can you explain that parable? What did that mean? And so Jesus, he begins to break down the parable for them. And I love, because when I'm reading this, what I realize is that Jesus, his focus wasn't on the sower. His focus was on the soil. Because he said, see, the former, now Jesus begins to break down the parable, and he says, the former sowed a word. So the seed was a word. And he says the soil, there was 4 different kinds. There was the path, there was the rocky, there was the thorn, and then there was good soil. And he said that they all responded differently to the seed or the word, right? So he goes down and he begins to break down these different types of soils. He says there's a path. He said, and when he sowed the seed, when he sowed that word, he said before it was ever able to take root, he said that Satan came and snatched it up. And see, I believe I'm a visual person, so I picture a path. And sometimes we create things in our mind, and we have our life all figured out, and we know the path that we are going on. And sometimes I think that we're just walking on the path that we've decided this is how our life should be. But then God, he says, I dropped a word back there for you. He said, before you were even able to get it, Satan came and snatched it up, because you had your mind made up that this was the path for you, that because I had went through all that this is the path for me, and that just because that man treated me like that, every man is toxic, so I'm just going to settle for this one right here. But God said, I was trying to drop a word for you back here, but you had your mind already made up that this was the path for me. And before you were ever able to pick that seed up, he said, Satan came and snatched it. And then he says that there was rocky ground. He said there was another type of soil, and it was rocky. He said, and it was hard because the rocks were there. So the soil was up top. It was just surface. He says the seed was able to take root, but the soil wasn't deep. So yeah, it produced something. He said, but it didn't last because its roots wasn't too strong. And I began to visualize again that there is some of us that have some church hurt. There are some of us that have just some life hurt that we got this guard up, and our hearts are just rock hard, and we're not really able to receive the seed that God is trying to place in our heart, and we just do it a little surface. Yeah, God, I'll go to church a little bit. I may watch online, or I may even just serve a little bit, but there's not too much to it. He said it's real surface, and the true transformation that he's trying to do in your life, he says, I can't do because you're keeping me surface on the outside. So the moment that you begin to produce fruit, the moment that you begin to grow, he says that it dies because it's too surface. He says there's no root in it. You won't let me go deep enough. And then he comes and he says, but then there's another type of soil, and yeah, you receive the word, and he says the seed, it's in the ground. He says, but then there is thorns that come, and they just become, and then they choke the seed out, because sometimes we just get these desires and these things that we feel that we need, that we want in our life. We want them so bad, and all alone they're choking us out from the true purpose that God has for our life. God says, I'm trying to do something in your life. He says, but I need you to respond to the seed that is being placed. And then he comes to the good ground. He says, but then there's good ground. He said there was some good soil. He said, and then it received the word. It says it hears my word. It accepts the word, and then it produces. And not just produces anything. He says sometimes 30 times, sometimes 60, and sometimes even 100 times, because it was good soil. So now I'm sitting here, and I don't know how I got all of this from my backyard. But I reflect back, because, sometimes you get yourself in a situation, and then now you have time to reflect, like, how did I get here? How did I truly get here? So I'm sitting here, and I'm thinking, like, how did we allow this backyard to get this bad? Like, really, what went wrong? And then I said, the front yard looks good. I said, it's green. The guy comes to cut it every 2 weeks. He actually just left this morning. It looked good. And I said, but that's what everybody sees. Even people that don't know us, the ones that's just driving by, the front yard looks good. The people that are coming over to visit company, they see the front yard, and unless I take them to the backyard, they will never see that. And sometimes that's the very thing that we do with our life, the thing that's on display, the thing that's in public, what we post on social media, the highlights, that looks good, but all along, we're not tending to any of the other problems. That is why we can sit here and you can be at church like, oh, she has her life all together. She up here singing and playing, or she's serving in the ministries, and all along at home her marriage is falling apart, or her finances ain't even making any ends meet. That is why you can do that, because what is up front? We're so good at putting on a front. We're so good. I can be at work. Yeah, I'm big dog at work. I'm calling the shots. I'm the boss. But then when I go home at night and I lay my head on the pillow, I'm crying because I'm about to lose my mind. But see, we don't want to tend to those things because nobody can see them. But you know what happens to soil when you don't take care of it? It damages things. It causes cracks in your foundation. It makes the house settle. And so now I'm studying and I'm looking and I realize that it's levels to taking care of your soil. Like I said, you couldn't just water it. You know, me and family was like, we're gonna water every day to get this dry grade. We're gonna heal those cracks. But what I realized as I start reading, I said, well, wait a minute, family, we can't water every day because too much water can cause problem too. And sometimes too much dryness will cause problem. And timing was everything because there was a time of the day that you should water. And then also there was a season that you should put certain things down, whether it was the spring or whether it was fall. See, it took a lot of tending to make sure that you kept your soil good. And so here's the thing, the outside factors, the storms aren't going to stop. The rain's not going to stop coming. There may be another a freeze. There may be another drought where it's just super dry. The outside factors are not going to change. So the key is to make sure you're taking your soil so that taking care of your soil so that you can withstand the outside pressures that are going to come regardless. See, in life, we don't like to address some of the issues that we're going to. Sometimes we just like to do what I call patchwork. I'm just going to fix that crack in the wall and paint over it. But that doesn't mean that the foundation is fixed. The problem, the root is being fixed. All we're doing is what we call patchwork. See, sometimes what I would do, Femi probably doesn't even realize, sometimes what I would do whenever I felt like I just needed a change in life, he would come home and the whole living room was moved around. He don't even know why. But sometimes that is what we do. Instead of getting to the whole problem, we do different things. Oh, I'm going to go change my hair, or I'm going to go shop, or we go do all these other things that is not affecting going to the root. We don't want to address the childhood trauma. We don't want to forgive the ex-husband or the ex-wife. We don't want to deal with those things, and because nobody can see them and the damage that it's doing, we continue to put on this front. Instead of going and putting things in place so that we're able to withstand those because life get messy. Life gets real messy, and it's not going to stop. Those things continue to come. So what you do is you create good soil. You create things that help to keep everything balanced. There's things like when I was reading, it said you put gutters down. It keeps the water away from your house. You put your shutter. There's things that you do to help balance your soil. And it's very important because the condition of your soil will determine the potential of your growth. The condition of your soil will determine the potential of your growth. We all did my kids, they come home with them now with the little cup and the little dirt and the seed, and you see what happens. But if I was just to get a seed and put it in a cup, it's not going to do anything. If I get a seed and I put it in water, it's not going to do anything. The condition of the soil is going to determine the potential of your growth. And that is why somebody can speak life into you, and that doesn't mean that's not what God said. You just wasn't ready to receive it. Your soil wasn't ready. And so that is why it's important to take care of your soil. So last week, it was some kids, they were out. So our street is like a horseshoe. And so we have this corner lot, and it has like a pretty good sized yard. And so the kids, they were out and they were playing football in our yard. Normally this is not a problem. We got the biggest yard out there, so I let the kids play. But now, I've been working on our yard. I've been working on the soil. So when I see these kids playing football in my yard, I said, Drew, go tell your friends to get out of my yard. And Trinity was like, you said that? I'm like, yes. I said, because sometimes you can't let people play around and stuff you've been working on. You've been trying to recover from. You can't let people play around on the things you've been working hard to recover from. But God has called us to be good soil. God has called us to be good soil. And what is good soil? He tells you. Everything is in the Bible. Anything you want to know is in there. He tells you, what is good soil? He said, it hears the word, it accepts the word, and it produces. He says good soil. Some versions even said it hears the call, it accepts the call, and it produces. That is what good soil is. But you have to just think about anything in the natural. The reason the enemy wants to block us from receiving the word is because he understands the power that is in the word. He understands the power that is in the word. And so whenever we receive God's word, we understand that the word it is eternal and it's true. And so I realized God's word is eternal and it's true. And he says some things. He said, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He said, I have plans to prosper and not to harm you. He says you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. See, there's some power in these seeds. There's some power in these words that God is wanting to plant into your good soil. And see, I believe that is important, because what happens is like, see, I could have been in denial that I was meant to be, a nurse practitioner at an OBGYN clinic working with young girls, because who am I to be working with little girls and young girls? And I had a history of where I got pregnant when I was in my senior year. See, I could have let that tell me, no, you can't go work with little girls and help them. But see, I know that God, he works all things for the good of those who love him. And so what I realized is, no, that is who I am called to be. And so every day I step into that office, when those young girls, and they come in there and they have the shame on them, they have that disappointment on them. No, I'm able to speak life into them, because they can see me standing up here with my white coat on, and they can say, yeah, I did get pregnant when I was a senior, but I was able to change some things around. There was a God that was in me. There was a word that was in me, and there's the same word that's in me that God has for them. So I believe because of the seed in the good ground, you're able to respond a little different. See, when you know what God has said about you, when you know what his word says, and when you know that his word is true, you are able to have a firm foundation. So when those pressures of life start to creep in, when they start to shake up against you, when they start to hurt. See, last night when we found out that Pat was sick and wasn't going to be able to sing, we didn't know what to do. But I just start to tell Family that I still have joy in chaos. See, I understand when Chandler starts singing that, because sometimes you have to understand that God has given you a word, and now your foundation is firm. Your foundation is firm. So now you're like, oh, you can't just say anything to me, enemy. You can't just come in my house thinking you about to run some stuff. Yeah, see, my kid is going to be good. My kid will graduate. My kid will be successful. You will not take over her mind. You will not take over his mind. My marriage will last. I will do what God has told me to do. Yes, I know who I am. I know whose I am. See, your response is just a little different when you have a word on the inside of you. So I encourage you on tonight, be good soil. Be good soil. That's all God. He said, I just need you to be good soil, because if you can receive this word that I have for you in your life, I will blow your mind. He said you will produce not just 30 times, not just 60 times, but even 100 times. He says, because I have good ground. He said, I have good word. I have something for you. Be good soil. Be good soil.